Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to Eagle News International on tonight's headlines. U.S. President Joe Biden said he believes Russian leader Vladimir Putin has decided to invade Ukraine and that the attack could begin in the coming days. Russia successfully test-fired its latest hypersonic ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and nuclear-capable ballistic missiles as part of planned exercises, according to the Kremlin, as tensions soar over Ukraine. Emergency crews battled to restore power to hundreds of thousands of homes in Britain after Storm Eunice carved a deadly trail across Western Europe and left transport networks in disarray. At least 13 people reportedly died. And police in Canada moved to dislodge the final truckers and protesters from downtown Ottawa in a mostly peaceful operation aimed at bringing an end to the 3 weeks of demonstrations over COVID health rules. And now to the news. U.S. President Joe Biden said he believes Russian leader Vladimir Putin has decided to invade Ukraine and that the attack could begin in the coming days. But with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken scheduled to speak with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Thursday, Biden said there's still time for negotiations to defuse the crisis. Here's President Biden.
As of this moment, I'm convinced he's made the decision. We have reason to believe that. Look, we have reason to believe the Russian forces are planning to and intend to attack Ukraine in the coming week, in the coming days. We believe that they will target Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, a city of 2.8 million innocent people.
So is diplomacy off the table then?
No, until he does, diplomacy is always a possibility. Russia has a choice between war and all the suffering it will bring, or diplomacy that will make a future safer for everyone. Last night, Russia agreed that Secretary of State Blinken and Foreign Minister Lavrov should meet on February 24th. February 24th in Europe. But if Russia takes military action before that date, we'll be clear that they have slammed the door shut on diplomacy. They will have chosen war, and they will pay a steep price for doing so. All of these are consistent with the playbook the Russians have used before to set up a false justification to act against Ukraine. This is also in line with the pretext scenarios that the United States and our allies and partners have been warning about for weeks.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was due to travel to Germany Saturday to meet Western leaders, with talks between him and U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris expected. Biden questioned whether it was a wise choice for Ukraine's leader to leave his country as warfares reached a fever pitch.
That's a judgment for him to make and a determination as to whether or not. I've spoken with Zelensky a dozen times, maybe more, I don't know. And it's in the pursuit of a diplomatic solution, it may not be it may be the wise choice, but it's his decision.
The United States says that with an estimated 149,000 Russian troops on Ukraine's borders, as many as 190,000 when including the Russian-backed separatist forces, an attack is inevitable. Compounding fears, Russia's defense ministry announced that President Putin would personally oversee previously scheduled drills involving missile launches on Saturday. And on the ground in Ukraine's disputed east, sporadic clashes fed a growing sense of dread. An AFP reporter near the front between Ukrainian government forces and the pro-Russian territory in the Lugansk region heard explosions and saw damaged civilian buildings on Kiev's side of the line. And there are growing fears that only a spark, which Washington warns could be a deliberate false flag incident created by the Russians, might now be needed to set off the largest military confrontation in Europe since World War II. A U.S. defense official said that more than 40% of the troops surrounding Ukraine were now uncoiled in a position to go on the offensive. Meanwhile, Ukraine's armed forces accused Moscow-backed rebels of launching a huge new wave of attacks that have intensified fears of a Russian invasion of its western neighbor. The Joint Military Command for East Ukraine reported 66 exchanges of fire by 7 a.m. local time, a high number compared to recent stages of the conflict, while the rebels called the situation critical. The statement said the rebels had resorted to using banned 82 and 120 millimeter caliber mortar shells in towns across the front running in the eastern regions of Lugansk and Donetsk. Moscow formally denies being involved in the conflict and calls it Ukrainian internal affairs. But monitors from the OSCE, European security body, have reported regular shipments of Russian weapons across the border throughout the 8-year war. The OSCE reported a massive 870 ceasefire violations across the conflict zone in its latest report Friday, which referred to incidents on Thursday. Rebel leaders accused the Ukrainian armed forces of trying to retake their two separatist regions by force, a claim Kyiv denies. The rebel leadership in Donetsk on Saturday called the situation critical and announced a general mobilization. The leader in the smaller separatist Lugansk region did the same about an hour later. Let's listen in.
Призываю земляков, пребывающих в запасе, прибыть в военные комиссариаты. Сегодня мной подписан указ о всеобщей мобилизации. Обращаюсь ко всем мужчинам республики, способным держать в руках оружие. Встать на защиту своих семей, своих детей, жен, матерей. Совместно...
Meanwhile, here are images published by the Russian Defense Ministry showing the Grad multiple rocket launcher firing at mock enemy targets during the Russia-Belarus Allied Resolve 2022 joint drills at the Oblast Lesnovsky training ground near the city of Baranovichi in Belarus. Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko said on Thursday his country could host nuclear weapons if it faces any external threats, as tensions soared between his ally Russia and the West over Ukraine. Ex-Soviet Belarus, which is not a nuclear power, will later this month hold a vote on constitutional reforms which could make it legal for Belarus to host nuclear weapons. Moscow and Minsk are currently holding joint military exercises in Belarus, exacerbating concerns that Russia is planning to escalate the conflict in Ukraine, and Belarus has said that all Russian soldiers and military equipment will leave after the drills end or conclude on February 20. Meanwhile, here are images released on February 18 by the press office of the separatist pro-Russia so-called Donetsk People's Republic, or DPR, purportedly showing people boarding buses ahead of evacuation from the Breakaways Republic de facto capital Donetsk. And this comes after Denis Pushilin, head of the DPR, announced a mass centralized departure of the population to the Russian Federation as fears of a Russian invasion of Ukraine grow. Mr. Pushilin said earlier Russian authorities and the neighboring southern Russian Rostov region were ready to accept the civilians and had prepared host places for them. Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered his government to hand the evacuees a sum of 10,000 rubles, around 100 euros, according to his spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, telling the state media that local authorities in the Rostov region will organize housing, food and medical help for the evacuees. President Putin ordered his emergency minister Alexander Chupryan to fly out to the southern region, which borders the separatist republics. Rebel leader Pushilin called on people to listen to the authorities and cooperate with the evacuation plan. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin said massive military drills near Ukraine's borders in recent weeks are purely defensive in nature and do not threaten anyone. He was speaking at a press conference with his Belarus's Alexander Lukashenko in Moscow. Again, let's listen in.
Должен констатировать, что эти учения имеют сугубо оборонительный характер и никому не угрожают. Как известно, я уже говорил ранее, США и другие члены Альянса пока не настроены, к сожалению, адекватно воспринимать эти три стержневых элемента нашей инициативы. В то же время
Russian President Vladimir Putin will hold a telephone call with French President Emmanuel Macron on Sunday as tensions spike in the crisis over Ukraine, according to the Kremlin. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the call was on the president's schedule for Sunday. To the U.S. now, where Dalip Singh, Deputy National Security Advisor and Deputy National Economic Council Director, again warned of U.S.-led international sanctions should President Vladimir Putin go ahead with an invasion of Ukraine. Take a look.
If Russia invades Ukraine, it will become a pariah to the international community. It will become isolated from global financial markets, and it would be deprived of the most sophisticated technological inputs. Russia would face the prospect of intense capital outflows, mounting pressure on its currency, surging inflation, higher borrowing costs, economic contraction, and the erosion of its productive capacity. Taken together, Russia would become more dependent on countries that cannot compensate for its losses. This would be a strategic defeat for Russia, pure and simple.
Meanwhile, 6 Filipino nationals from Ukraine arrived here on Friday, days after the government announced free repatriation flights for nationals in the crisis-hit Eastern European state. The 6, including a minor, arrived via Turkish Airlines Flight 84 at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport, Terminal 3. The repatriation program was launched because of fears that Russia would invade Ukraine as its troops massed along the latter's borders. The Department of Foreign Affairs has estimated more than 350 Filipinos living in the European nation. The DFA said the repatriation was made possible through the close coordination among the embassy, the Philippine Honorary Consulate General in Kiev, and the Philippine Consulate General in Istanbul to make sure that government assistance would be available to the group at all transit points. 4 of the 6 repatriates boarded international flights from Kiev, while 2 took their flights from Lviv. Philippine Ambassador to Poland, Leia Ruiz, is urging all Filipinos in Ukraine to contact the Philippine Embassy in Warsaw and the Philippine Honorary Consulate General in Kiev if they would like to request for repatriation assistance from Ukraine. More on the Ukraine tension. Russia on Saturday successfully test-fired its latest hypersonic ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and nuclear-capable ballistic missiles as part of planned exercises, according to the Kremlin, as tensions soar over Ukraine. All the missiles hit their targets, confirming their performance objectives, according to a statement, adding that the drills included Tu-95 bombers as well as submarines. And here, as you can see here in the Kremlin's Situation Room, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Belarus's President Alexander Lukashenko are observing the beginning of the military drills as tensions between Russia and the West rise over a Russian military buildup encircling Ukraine, with U.S. President Joe Biden warning that Mr. Putin plans an invasion within days. Now, during her speech at the Munich Security Conference, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris said any Russian invasion of Ukraine will invite not only damaging economic sanctions, but also a bolstered NATO on Europe's eastern flank. Take a look.
And we will not stop with economic measures. We will further reinforce our NATO allies on the eastern flank. In fact, together, we have already taken steps to strengthen our deterrence and collective defense.
The Baltics have asked NATO allies to send reinforcements to their countries on top of the existing alliance battle groups deployed there after Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014. Britain and Germany have pledged extra troops for the region, while the U.S. has sent 4,700 reinforcements to neighboring Poland, which also shares a border with Belarus and Russia. The U.S. and Ukraine say there are now around 150,000 Russian troops massed on Ukraine's borders in Russia and Belarus. In other news now, police in Canada moved to dislodge the final truckers and protesters from downtown Ottawa in a mostly peaceful operation aimed at bringing an end to 3 weeks of demonstrations over COVID-19 health rules. Take a look.
Even this morning, all unlawful protesters were given many opportunities to leave. Officers then turned to the intersection of Rideau and Sussex, making more arrests and clearing that location. As of 3 p.m. today, we've arrested 70 people. They have been charged with multiple various offenses, including mischief.
Defiant against an order blared over loudspeakers to disperse or face arrest, hundreds of trucker-led protesters have been occupying the Canadian Capital Centre for 3 weeks, demanding an end to COVID health rules. It took the police line, watched over by snipers and backed by tactical vehicles, several minutes to push the protesters back a few centimeters, hours for a few meters. Now, protesters used the snow to their advantage, shoveling it into piles to act as barriers against the police advance. While the so-called Freedom Convoy began with truckers protesting against mandatory COVID vaccines to cross the U.S. border, its demands have grown to include an end to all pandemic rules and, for many, a wider anti-establishment agenda. An emergency crew Saturday battled to restore power to hundreds of thousands of homes in Britain after Storm Eunice carved a deadly trail across Western Europe and left transport networks in disarray. At least 13 people were killed by falling trees, flying debris, and high winds in Britain, Ireland, the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, and Poland. Here's Ryan Florentino from our UK Bureau.
Storm Eunice killed at least 7 people in Europe on Friday, pummeling Britain with record-breaking winds and forcing millions to take shelter as it disrupts flights, trains and ferries across Western Europe. London was eerily empty after the British capital was placed under its first ever red weather warning, meaning there is danger to life. The highest weather alert was also declared across southern England, South Wales, and the Netherlands, with many schools closed and rail travel paralyzed as towering waves breached seawalls along the coast. Meanwhile, Eunice's winds knocked out power to more than 140,000 homes in England, mostly in the southwest, and 80,000 properties in Ireland, utility companies said. Around the UK capital, 3 people were taken to hospital after suffering injuries in the storm, and a large section of the roof on the capital's Millennium Dome was shredded by the gales. One wind gust of 122 miles or 196 kilometers per hour was measured on the Isle of Wight off southern England. Provisionally the highest gust ever recorded in England, the Met Office said. Scientists said the Atlantic storm's tail could pack a sting jet, a rarely seen meteorological phenomenon. Eunice caused high waves to batter the Brittany coast in northwest France, while Belgium, Denmark and Sweden all issued weather warnings. Hundreds of flights were cancelled or delayed at London's Heathrow and Gatwick airports and Schiphol in Amsterdam. Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who has placed the British Army on standby, tweeted, "We should all follow the advice and take precautions to keep safe." London's rush hour streets, where activity has been slowly returning to pre-pandemic levels, were virtually deserted as many heeded government advice to stay home. Trains into the capital were already running limited services during the morning commute, with speed limits in place, before even 7 rail operators in England suspended all operations. Experts said the frequency and intensity of the storms could not be linked necessarily to climate change, but Richard Allen, professor of climate science at the University of Reading, said a heating planet was leading to more intense rainfall and higher sea levels. That's all reporting from the United Kingdom. I am Ryan Florentino, and we live in interesting times.
In other news, Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett met with Bahrain's King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa. during a historic visit to the small, oil-rich Gulf country 17 months after they ended decades of tensions to normalize ties. Here's Catherine Coronel from our Manama, Bahrain Bureau.
A historic trip which would have been unthinkable a few years ago, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett became the first Israeli leader to make an official visit to Bahrain after touching down on the Gulf state on Monday. Before taking off, he highlighted the importance of closer relations between the two countries.
Consider it a historical day to receive the Prime Minister of Israel. His visit to Bahrain will be a fruitful visit, a successful visit, because of his determination and leadership towards a joint integrated effort for the best of the two peoples. I thank him for coming.
And I think we discussed many ways to build new bridges and an architecture for a stronger and more stable region.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to continuing this remarkable relationship.
Inshallah. By the will of God.
By the will of God. In Hebrew, it's Bezrat Hashem. In Arabic, it's Inshallah.
Bennett's Bahrain trip follows a visit by Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz earlier this month that saw the two countries sign a defense agreement. The deal covered intelligence, procurement, and joint training. As part of the agreements, Israel is set to post a naval official in Bahrain. Earlier, he met with King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa and Crown Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa, who is also Prime Minister of the island nation. It was the latest diplomatic breakthrough since several Arab states under the U.S.-brokered 2020 Abraham Accords entered the isolation of Israel despite the ongoing Israel-Palestinian conflict. The strengthening of ties, which highlights a shift in geopolitical priorities from some Arab states, increasingly worried about the Iran's nuclear program, a concern also shared by Israel. Reporting from Manama, Bahrain, this is Catherine Cornell, Eagle News International.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang angking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Wow! Okay lang ba mag-picture ako dito?
Sana ingatan mo lang, baka kasi mag-uho.
This is your turista vlogger! Aray! Uy! Uy! Huli ka!
Hello? Ano? Gusto mo na? O di break mo? Boss! Ay, kumapot.
Welcome back. Here in the country today posted a total of 1,923 new COVID cases. That is the lowest single-day tally for this year. This is the lowest number of daily infections since December 30, 2021, with 1,623 new cases recorded. The tally is also the sixth straight day with cases below 3,000, and the first time the number was less than 2,000. Meanwhile, DOH recorded 198 new fatalities, higher than the 79 logged from the previous day. The COVID-19 death toll totals 55,607. Almost 3.5 million people were vaccinated during the third run of the Philippines National Vaccination Drive, or Bayanihan Bakunahan, from February 10 to the 18th, that according to the Department of Health. While the figures fell short of DOH's 5 million targeted vaccines, Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergara said the drive's result is still an achievement in the efforts to battle COVID-19 pandemic. Take a look.
So we were able to achieve about almost 3.5 million na nabakunahan natin during this Bayanihan Bakunahan 3. Bagamat hindi po natin na-achieve yung 5 million na ating target, atin pong kinagagalak pa rin na meron po tayong achievement na at least 3.5 million, nakadagdag po sa pagtaas ng antas ng pagbabakuna sa ating bansa. Tutuloy-tuloy lang ho natin ang pag-ramp up ng vaccination so that we can be able to cover as much as of the population as possible.
The Philippines has already fully vaccinated 62.3 million since the inoculation program against COVID started in March 2021. Some 9.6 million have received their booster shots, while more than 395,000 in the 5 to 11 age group have the first dose. And Washington, D.C. is dropping the city's requirement that people show proof of COVID vaccination before entering many businesses in the city as COVID transmission continues to trend downward throughout the region. Here's Jessica Bautista from our Washington, D.C. Bureau.
After requiring people to show proof of vaccination before entering establishments such as restaurants, indoor gyms, and entertainment facilities, the District of Columbia drops that requirement beginning February 15, 2022. Mayor Muriel Bowser announces the latest easing of COVID-19 restrictions on her regular coronavirus situational update.
Additionally, beginning February 15th, as you know, the limited public health emergency that I put in effect in December expires, as will the requirement for indoor venues to verify that patrons are vaccinated. Again, businesses may choose to keep vaccination requirements in place at their establishment with appropriate signage.
The mayor's office reports that since the height of the Omicron wave in D.C., COVID-19 cases have dropped by more than 90%, and there's been a 95% reduction in hospitalizations. Although the vaccine requirement, which was first implemented here in the district of January 15, 2022, has been lifted, businesses may choose to still keep vaccination requirements in place. Additionally, Mayor Bowser announces that beginning March 1, masks will not be required at restaurants, sports and entertainment venues, gyms, recreation centers, and indoor athletic facilities, houses of worship, businesses, grocery stores and pharmacies, retail establishments, DC government offices, areas with no public interactions. Masks, however, will still be required at any private business that wants to require use of masks by employees or customers. Schools, childcare facilities, and libraries, congregate facilities, nursing homes, assisted living facilities, shelters, dorms, and correctional facilities, healthcare, medical facilities, public transit, taxis, rideshare vehicles. It also includes DC government facilities with direct interaction between employees and the public, such as the DMV service centers and DHS service centers. The district reports that as of February 14, 2022, there are 475 new confirmed positive COVID-19 cases, 133,295 overall positive cases total, and 1,309 COVID-related deaths. Jessica Bautista, Eagle News, Washington, D.C.
From the U.S., we go to Japan, where the country will start to relax border curbs to allow students and business people into the country from March. Here's Dennis Liu for an update. Dennis.
Good evening, Alma. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida announced that Japan will ease its strict virus border rules to allow students and business people into the country from March. But tourists will still be barred.
3月1日からは検査、行動把握、そして感染拡大リスクの高い場合の待機期間の設定といった基本的な条件を守ることにより、引き続き G7 で最も厳しい水準は維持しつつ、水際対策の骨格を段階的に緩和していきます。外国人の新規入国については、受け入れ責任者の管理のもと、観光目的以外の新規入国者に限って認めることといたします。
Japan has barred tourists since the early days of the pandemic and has in some cases prevented even existing foreign residents from entering the country. The move comes with growing pressure on Japan from the business community and academics to loosen the border restrictions. The curbs are the toughest in the G7 but have broad support from Japanese voters. Last November, the government slightly loosened the rules to allow some students and business people to enter, but then quickly reversed the plan weeks later as the Omicron strain emerged. Experts say after an Omicron-driven spike in infections, cases in Japan now appear to have peaked. More than 400,000 people whose visas have already been approved by authorities were waiting to enter Japan as of January 4th. More than 150,000 of those are students, with another 129,000 workers hired to take part in a technical training program that is a key source of foreign labor for several industries in the country. While Japan has not pursued a zero COVID policy and has avoided strict lockdowns, it has made tough border measures a centerpiece of its pandemic response. Even citizens and returning residents able to enter have been subject to quarantines of up to 2 weeks, with testing before and after entering the country. Kishida said quarantine requirements would now be eased, going from 7 to 3 days if arrivals test negative. Quarantine will be removed altogether for those with 3 vaccine doses coming from countries judged low risk, he added, without specifying particular nations. But asked about tourism, Kishida said the issue was still being discussed, with no time frame in place for a full reopening. Japan has recorded more than 20,950 deaths. In the pandemic, polls show Japanese broadly favor the tough restrictions, with nearly 60% of respondents in a recent survey by public broadcaster NHK backing a continued ban on entry. This is the latest for now. Reporting from Tokyo, Japan, this is Dennis Liu. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Dennis. Meanwhile, Ontario eased more COVID restrictions as cases drop amid falling positivity rates and declining hospital and ICU admissions. Here's Yolanda Aspiras from our Toronto Bureau.
On Thursday, February 17, Ontario eased public health restrictions earlier than the planned date of the next phase in reopening, as the province states that key indicators are improving amidst the battle against the Omicron variant. As of Thursday, capacity limits are removed from all indoor public settings that require proof of vaccination, such as restaurants, cinemas, gyms, convention centers, and the like, as well as other public places that opt into mandatory proof of vaccination. Social gatherings will increase to 50 people indoors and 100 outdoors, unless it is an organized public event, which then has unlimited capacity outdoors. The province has also made booster doses available to youth ages 12 to 17 this past Friday. Furthermore, the province plans on lifting all capacity limits on March 1st, with masking remaining a requirement. The announcement that all proof of vaccinations will be removed on the same day from all settings has sparked wide discussions within the province. Andrea Horvat, Ontario official opposition NDP leader, criticized Premier Ford for this decision.
I think everybody wants to have restaurants opened and gyms and pretty much everywhere. But the thing that allows us to do that and keep us all safe is the certificate program. You know, really the only people who see the certificates as a restriction or a problem are the anti-vaxxers, the people who refuse to get vaccinated. So it's pretty clear that what Doug Ford has said this morning is basically caving to those anti-vaxxers. I believe we need to keep those mandates in place. We don't want seniors to be worried about who they're sitting next to in a restaurant. We don't want families to worry about their kids who can't get vaccinated.
The Registered Nurses Association of Ontario, or RNAO, brings attention to the nursing crisis happening within the province and how the government's decision to ease restrictions and to remove proof of vaccination will further endanger several patients. Due to the influx of Omicron cases that overwhelmed hospitals just recently, several Ontarians waiting for surgeries and treatment for non-COVID related illnesses were backlogged. These people may be in danger of more delays if restrictions are eased too quickly. The RNAO highlights that the majority of health resources in hospitals are still currently occupied by COVID-19 patients. As of February 14, the total number of active cases in the province is 26,170. In the past 2 weeks, 657 people in the province died from COVID-19. Yolanda Aspiras, Eagle News, Toronto.
Japan's economy rebounded to grow 1.3% quarter-on-quarter in the 3 months to December, driven by higher demand after emergency virus restrictions were lifted, according to data. Here's Dennis Liu back with the details.
Data showed Tuesday that Japan's economy rebounded in the last part of 2021. As virus cases slowed and restrictions were eased, it spurred demand before the Omicron wave hit the country. The world's third largest economy grew 1.3% in the 3 months to December, rebounding from a revised contraction of 0.7% in the previous 3 months as virus cases surged. The quarter-on-quarter figure released by Japan's Cabinet Office Tuesday was slightly lower than market expectations of 1.5%. It was driven by a sharp recovery in spending after the lifting of emergency virus restrictions in October. The data also showed the economy grew 1.7% in real terms in 2021, the first annual expansion for the economy in 3 years. After a spike in virus cases in the summer of 2021, when Japan hosted the Olympics with virtually no spectators, the government lifted restrictions in October, prompting private consumption to grow 2.7% quarter-on-quarter. That growth is unlikely to have lasted, however, with a wave of Omicron cases spurring new restrictions in January. The restrictions, which mainly target nightlife and are far less strict than a blanket lockdown, will be in place until early March. Masamichi Adachi, UBS Securities chief economist for Japan, said self-restraint by consumers has been greater than expected and the pace of booster vaccinations is very slow. Still, he said they are expecting that the Japanese economy will resume a solid recovery this year after disappointing stagnation in 2021. He added that the timing of the rebound is just delayed. Tom Learmouth, Japan economist at Capital Economics, also said the road bump created by the Omicron variant would likely only temporarily derail growth. For 2021, the 1.7% expansion reversed the trend seen in both 2020 and 2019, with private consumption, including household spending, up for the year, despite the summer virus spike and emergency restrictions. Private non-residential investment was down, however, as a chip shortage and supply chain issues weigh on factory output. Last year, Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida announced a record $490 billion stimulus to shore up the country's patchy pandemic recovery. But the effect of this spending is only likely to begin being felt from the first quarter of 2022, according to what The Economist said. This is the latest for now. Reporting from Tokyo, Japan, this is Dennis Liu. We live in interesting times.
And back to the U.S., where go to New York. We go over to New York, where Joan Soriano spoke with the Philippine consulate about the absentee voting process. Here's Joan. Hello, Joan.
In New York, we reached out to the Philippine Consulate General to find out the current status of absentee voting for the upcoming presidential election. Let's hear what they had to say.
First of all, I'd like to limit the discussions to voter registration because we are not yet into the actual voting yet. So as a backgrounder, overseas voting registration for next year's election started in December 2019 and it ended October of this year. And the good news is we had a total of, there was a more than 200% increase of the number of registered voters for next year's elections compared to those who registered for the 2019 elections. It's actually a 205% increase because in 2019, we only had around 4,024 Filipinos who registered as voters. And for this year, we had a total of 8,264. It's more than double. And this is a trend that's usually noticeable when the national elections are for president and vice president.
What steps were taken to ensure good voting turnout despite the pandemic?
We had a very healthy campaign to encourage qualified Filipinos who have not registered yet to register for next year's elections. So we went out to the different states under our jurisdiction during our consular outreach activities. So there are 10 states under our jurisdiction, and we strongly campaigned with the assistance of our Filipino community partners to encourage Filipinos to register as overseas voters. And this would include former Filipinos. We encourage them to reacquire Philippine citizenship and become dual citizens, so they may also reacquire their right to vote. And we have had several Saturdays where we kept the consulate open for this specific purpose. And I think that helped boost up the number of new registrants.
No, I agree, and the turnout shows that it worked. And lastly, why do votes of Filipinos overseas count?
Because Philippine policies affect all Filipinos regardless of where you are. And this is one right where each citizen really has the power to decide the future of the country. Because as a citizen, we basically have more or less two choices: accept things as they are and do nothing, or try to do something about it and help chart the future not only for ourselves but for our children and grandchildren as well. And this can be done through the power of the ballot. And this is why we really encourage all qualified citizens to participate. So registering is the first important step, but the second and more important step is, of course, to go out and vote. Because when you register and you don't vote, then it's really not as effective. So that's the next challenge that we all face, is how to encourage all registered voters to participate. We really do not dictate who they should vote for. We leave them up to their own evaluation and good conscience. But what we do want them to do is, number one, go out, participate, and vote. And number two, regardless of who may win, whether this is your candidate or not, to support the new leadership of the country, because that is the only way for us to really move forward and prosper.
Joanne Soriano, Eagle News, New York, New York.
We'll be back with more news right after this break.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Panoorin ang Taragim agad-agad ngayong linggo, alas 7 ng gabi, kasama ang always ready to make you happy na sina Berwin Mayley, Donna Cariaga, Gary Lim, and Tuesday Vargas. Promise, masaya ito.
Welcome to Mobile Legends!
Los Angeles Rams fans are reacting after winning the Super Bowl against the Cincinnati Bengals. Sunday's victory represented a spectacular jackpot for the Rams management, who recruited heavily for the past year with the goal of being able to bring an NFL title back to Los Angeles at their own Sophie Stadium. Megs Estrella from our Los Angeles Bureau for the report.
It goes without saying that Los Angeles is a sports-heavy city and is routinely in the mix when discussions revolve around franchise teams in the MLB, NBA, and MLS. Football, however, has been one sport wherein LA came up short not only because of the absence of championships, but more obviously due to the lack of a team. Fast forward to the present, not only has Los Angeles secured 2 football teams, they've also built a shiny new stadium, and thanks to the Rams' win over the Cincinnati Bengals at Super Bowl 56, have delivered an NFL championship to the city.
The Rams are winners. They've always been winners. This is a new tradition. This is going to be it for now on. The Rams are number 1.
My reaction to the game was that I had a feeling the whole time that Matt Stafford was going to win the game on the final play, which he kind of did. But I just always had a feeling that they were going to come back and win it. So, yeah, it was pretty cool to watch, and I'm happy for them, and I'm happy for Cooper Kupp because I think he's an amazing receiver. And, yeah, I'm just happy for the city of L.A. because that's, 3 championships now with the Lakers, the Dodgers, and the Rams.
Super Bowl number 56 belongs to L.A. Rams. A Hollywood ending is pretty crazy, so number 1, baby, let's go.
Barely a few days removed from the Super Bowl, and analysts are already speculating over the Rams roster next season and if the defending champs have a shot at a repeat. However, many Angelinos prefer to ponder about the future later, choosing instead to take a page out of head coach Sean McVay's playbook to enjoy this moment. Mix Australia, Eagle News, Los Angeles.
And imagine walking into a theme park full of desserts. Esther Danga takes us to the Great Grand Sweet Destination, a Candyland-themed dessert park in Pattaya. Esther.
Hi everyone! Summer is approaching and today we are here at Pattaya Sweet and Grand Candyland. And since Thailand reopened already for the tourists and the Test and Go scheme already up to the tourists, we will travel here in Pattaya and show you the beauty of this place. Looking for a unique destination near the capital city, Bangkok? Well, for the theme park lovers, the Great and Grand Sweet Destination, also known as Candyland, is one to consider. It is located in Pattaya City, just an hour drive from Bangkok. The admission fee on this beautiful place during weekdays is only 99 baht and 120 baht on weekends and holidays for adults, while it is only 66 baht for kids. It is open daily at 9 in the morning till 7 in the evening. You can find a life-size dessert figures from sundaes to candy houses to donuts and many more. Well, summer is fast approaching and this colorful atmosphere is worth the visit. This is a perfect and sweet place to bond with your family and friends. A very fun and exciting place, especially for the travelers who are candy lovers. From Pattaya, Thailand, this is Esther Danga and we live in interesting times.
As always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's plan is to keep us moving forward. This has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert and stay informed, because we live in interesting times. Good night.